Let's speak now with Dr. Olena Lennon, adjunct professor with the Department of National Security at the University of New Haven. Professor Lennon, good to have you on the show. Appreciate you joining us this morning. I want to start by asking you about that seeming thaw, if you like, in relations between Ukraine and the US, both going to be meeting in Saudi Arabia. I'm wondering, first of all, how delicate is the situation and what could potentially go wrong?
Thank you for having me. The situation is very delicate, as you rightfully said, because we all know that President Zelenskyy and Donald Trump had a fallout in the White House. And Zelenskyy has been trying to do all he can to repair the relationship. He didn't necessarily apologize, but he sent a letter signaling that he was ready for peace and that he was ready to work with the Trump administration, because the situation is quite precarious for Ukraine. Of course, they're in dire straits right now because the suspension of military aid and intelligence sharing has definitely severed a crucial lifeline for not just Ukrainian military, but for the Ukrainian civilians as well. Without American military aid and continued ammunition supplies, plus intelligence sharing, the Ukrainian military cannot just resist continued Russian advances on the front lines, but the Ukrainians would not be able to protect civilian infrastructure as well and maintain, basic, standard of life. So the situation is quite dire for Ukraine, and Zelenskyy is trying to do all he can to repair the altercation in the White House that didn't quite go as well as he had expected.
Right.
And I think he's really trying to signal to Trump that he's willing to work with him and that he's willing to make concessions.
Professor, I know a lot can change and it's a fast-moving situation, but Donald Trump told reporters at the Oval Office just hours ago he's going to be in Saudi Arabia next week. Can we infer that he's going to be there to sign a major agreement, maybe on peace, maybe on minerals as well?
I think that it's quite reasonable to expect that Zelenskyy is ready to move forward with the minerals deal. He has been in negotiations with the White House for a couple of weeks now, and we have seen several drafts of the deal, and it's been pretty clear that both Ukraine and the United States are interested in this deal. So it is of mutual interest and it is of mutual benefit to the US and Ukraine, as the two countries are strategic partners in this deal. So I think we will see a continued progress on the minerals deal. I wouldn't go as far as to suggest that we should expect a peace deal necessarily, because that is quite an undertaking. And of course, it will require some very serious security guarantees. Ukraine cannot accept Russia's terms of peace, which would basically add up to capitulation on Ukraine's side, without first seeing security guarantees from Western partners, whether it's the US and Europe or perhaps just the European countries, if the United States will indeed withdraw completely. But it remains to be seen what kind of security guarantees Ukraine can rely on and who will participate in that exchange before Ukraine can agree to any reasonable peace deal.
I understand, Professor. I do have a question perhaps about a potential ceasefire then. Does Russia need to be there? I mean, right now there's no word about Moscow's presence, and we know earlier that Ukraine was very unhappy when the US talked with Russia in Saudi Arabia without any involvement from Kyiv.
But ultimately, the only country that can end the war right now is Russia. Of course, if Putin so decided that he could, in fact, withdraw his troops from Ukraine and declare some sort of a victory that he could package into enough of a victory to sell to his population. But he's not willing to. And I think recently he actually put out a new statement saying that he's not interested in the peace deal with Ukraine. He's interested in the peace deal with the U.S. In the U.S., the Ukrainians are completely denied agency here in this process, and it's not something that Ukrainians can agree to. So I think that at this point, Russia has the upper hand, and I think that with the Trump administration signaling that they're willing to work with Russia and that they're discontinuing their military aid to Ukraine because they want the war to end. But for Ukraine, again, it adds up to capitulation. Ukraine will not accept these terms of agreement, and I think the expectation here is that for the U.S. to be the mediator and to help strengthen Ukraine's position, not weaken it. The approach that the Trump administration has taken so far is weaken the weaker side and strengthen the stronger side and force Ukraine to capitulate. Instead, what I think they need to do is to try and equalize Ukraine's and Russia's position so that the Russians would also be interested in the peace deal.
Okay. I want to ask you about what happened on Thursday as well when they had an EU defense summit, an emergency one. 26 leaders backing new defense plans. I mean, I know you keep getting asked this question, you know, and it really is whether or not it's really going to make a difference this time. I mean, we had the Danish Prime Minister saying, spend, spend, spend. Not clear if they really mean it or whether it will really happen. But we know that, you know, that when Donald Trump says something like drill, 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 or if they don't pay, I'm not going to defend them, it's probably going to happen. I mean, how do you read what's been happening as far as the EU is concerned and NATO is concerned?
Well, I think the Europeans are very clear-eyed about the reality facing them, and I do think that they have been stepping up their efforts, not just in talking the talk, but also walking the walk. But there's only so much they can do, as it is a race against time. The Europeans have a great potential to ramp up their defense production and to boost Ukraine's defense and to actually secure themselves and provide a strong defense and deterrence against potential Russian aggression beyond Ukraine, but they simply lack time to do so quickly enough. Look, the European economies combined are still at least 5 times larger than that of Russia. So Europeans do have the needed capacity to provide for their own defense and for the defense of Ukraine, but the political will is still lacking. The question of the day is, will Europeans be able to go into full mobilization mode, politically, economically, socially, and militarily, to take this issue very seriously and replace the United States as the main security or military aid provider to Ukraine right now? That remains to be seen. And the other question that is still on the table is, will the U.S. just get out of the fight and stop funding Ukraine, or will they also put some restrictions on American-made weapons in Europe? So will they prevent Europeans from giving American weapons to Ukraine? Is another level that we still don't know if that's going to happen.
Okay, lots of unknowns and lots of questions. We do have to leave it there. Professor Lennon, we thank you for your time and for your thoughts. Dr. Olena Lennon is adjunct professor with the Department of National Security at the University of New Haven.